Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Gary Batman, Dr. B, here talking for our Teletrim live stream. We've been building to this Friday, to Knowledge Friday, about this week's topic is going to be metabolic syndrome. So, Teletrim talk on metabolic syndrome. So, this week we've been covering a lot of topics about visceral fat and a couple of hormones and things like that. And now we want to try to bring it all together on why is that important? What does it affect? And it's one of those things that sounds really boring. Metabolic syndrome. Not flash, not anything. But it's probably one of the most important diagnoses that you've never been given or never been told that you have. Because it's not particularly a disease. It's more like a bunch of signal flags. There's about 5 that your body's waving and saying, hey, look, we're heading towards a big disaster. Like, do something, do something. And that big disaster is diabetes and heart disease. But it's not too late to make changes. You know, it's taking the off-ramp, doing those things. Got my notes. So metabolic syndrome is it's a cluster of symptoms that travel together. So a bad group chat where, you know, once one person joins, keep showing up and making a mess. Basically, it's a combination of high blood pressure, and to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, you don't need all of those. You just need 3. And one of the other little factors is kidney disease, but I'll mention that later. So once you have 3 of these factors in this metabolic syndrome, your long-term risk factor for cardiovascular disease and heart attack, stroke, that kind of stuff goes way up. Okay, it's almost like your body saying to you, "We need to talk," and it's important. Okay, I guess the big thing that sort of starts where all of it is visceral fat. And we've been hammering on it all week, and this is the important reason. Like we kind of said, not all fat is equal. We know our external fat's a bit more of just the stuff we see. You know, it's that aesthetic fat. It is just kind of plain storage. It's kind of like a battery. It doesn't do much. The visceral fat, the fat around our organs, is almost itself like an organ. It almost operates like an endocrine gland, a hormone gland, because that visceral fat itself interferes with our hormones and stuff like that. Quick question: is metabolic syndrome the same as diabetes? It's not. It's not the same as diabetes. There we go. Hold on. Metabolic syndrome is what you have before you have full-blown diabetes. Okay, so again, metabolic syndrome is a big warning that our body is already struggling with insulin, fat, and other hormones, and we can do something about it before we tick over into that diabetes area. So this is the best time to intervene. Again, not all fat's equal. The fat under our skin's annoying. You know, that's the thing we see, and it doesn't make us look pretty for summer. You know, but the fat inside, that visceral fat, that's the thing that's metabolically active. It's giving us those hormones that are messing things up. So what hormones does it release? And that visceral fat, we've got all of it, it's responsible for us having a bit more free fatty acids, so a bit more fat in our bloodstream. And then what that does is that triggers a cascade, or it triggers a chain of events that interferes with insulin. And it sort of prevents insulin from putting sugar into our muscles and us using it efficiently. That insulin resistance we talked about. It also increases inflammatory signals. So part of the cascade it starts is a bunch of little cytokines and things that just make our body miserable and adds a bit of damage to stuff. And part of those things in the cascade, they're the things that help push our blood sugar the wrong way. You know, messing with insulin, and that interferes with our blood pressure. For anyone there's a nerd out there, our renin-angiotensin syndrome and angiotensin system gets messed up, so that's going to affect our blood pressure. And also having all this extra fat means our cholesterol and triglycerides go up and get out of whack. So it's the wrong direction, okay? So it's basically that visceral fat's there, kind of like those uninvited guests that show up and just kind of wreak havoc, or it's sitting there. It's that person who's sitting there emailing you at 2 a.m. or texting you DMs at 2 a.m. saying, hey. It's interfering with things. Can skinny people have metabolic syndrome? Yeah. So what it's called normal weight metabolic syndrome. And again, it's because the fat is actually stored on the inside around your organs and not on the outside. You don't actually see it, which might raise the question of how do we know if we have fat around our organs? And that's where you're going to need a medical professional or X-ray vision. I'm Batman. I'm not a Superman. So some of the ways that we can see visceral fat on the inside, maybe a little bit with our eyes. So if we are relatively skinny or whatever, but yet we still have a disproportionately large belly, or if we find that when our weight fluctuates, it's our belly fat that shrinks. Our belly, hey, our pants are a little looser. That can be one sign that it's our visceral fat that's changing. So aesthetically, to a less degree. Then there's also blood. Oh, actually, you know what? The best way is not just look, is to actually measure. In the GP office, measuring tape on the desk all the time, pull it out. How big around are you? And there's actually charts that you compare to find what your sort of what my risk factor is. Should I be worried? And these have been collected from all ages, all ethnic groups. So you just need to find the one sort of specific to you. Not the specific one that says, hey, I'm looking good with this waist, the one that's meant for your sort of genetic makeup. So thanks for the question. That was a good one. Yeah, so we can measure. So waistline is probably the best. A lot of times you'll see on weight loss apps or even at the doctor when you're filling out stuff, BMI. So that's body mass index. So it's ratio of height to how much you weigh. And while it was a good tool in the time, back in the day, and it's still, for a quick calculation off the cuff, it's pretty good. If I haven't seen you, I haven't been able to measure your waist, it's kind of off the cuff. We can go, you probably should be a bit lower. Measuring your waist and comparing it is going to be the most accurate for metabolic syndrome, of the two, more or less. Okay. Cool. So then we can see or measure. Then the other thing is you can do blood tests. So some of the blood tests you're going to look at are fasting, so not eating overnight blood sugar, and I'll talk about that result in a second. You can look at liver tests to see is there extra fat or interrupted liver enzymes on a blood test. We also look at our cholesterol and triglycerides. So we've got high triglycerides and high bad cholesterol and low good cholesterol. Big red flag. Yeah, and then we can also look at our renal function, and if we're starting to have sort of early problems with our kidneys, because it's the big filter that gets rid of stuff, sometimes that can be a sign that, hey, we got too much garbage being pushed through our kidneys. So that's sort of a later big red flag. We want to focus on the big ones. Yeah, insulin though, insulin and sugar, that's kind of the center of it, and that's what we talked about with visceral fat, because at the center is insulin resistance. And insulin, if you remember from earlier in the week and last week, insulin's the hormone that's the key to letting sugar into our muscles, to our cells, to all the parts of our body. So it's kind of like the thing that opens, starts the car, lets the car go, or actually opens the fuel pump, lets the gas. Okay, bad analogy. Basically, it's the thing that lets all the sugar and energy from our blood to where it needs to go, like our muscles that we're using to run away from predators or fight predators, or lift our children onto our shoulders, wipe their bottoms, change nappies. What happens in insulin resistance, if you remember from the week, is the key that opens the door is a bit rusty, or the lock's a bit rusty, so we can't open as many doors, or the hinges are rusty and we can't open them as wide, so we don't get as much sugar where it goes. And again, if from our previous talk, if the body sees this sugar not going into the muscles and it's in the blood, then it sees high sugar and it goes, oh, well, I must need to have someone go take this sugar and put it in the cells, so it releases more insulin and more insulin. But yet the insulin's not effective and it's not pushing the sugar in. So what happens is when you reach that level of insulin, it goes, well, we must have all the sugar we need. Let's store it to save it for when we do have to run away from a predator or fight a predator. So our sugar level stays high. Our fat storage increases. And one of the effects on that, again, part of that cascade infecting, is our blood pressure will slowly creep up. So again, like we always say, it's not a willpower problem. It's a hormonal traffic jam. It's a biological problem, you know. Question. Okay, if I lose weight, does metabolic syndrome automatically go away? I guess the short answer is, for them, often yes. Okay. But it's kind of how you lose the weight that really matters. So if you crash diet, you know, you lose weight. Oh, yay, I lost weight. But if you crash diet, besides losing some fat and whatever, you tend to lose quite a bit of muscle. And if you lose muscle, you know, muscle is one of the big things that's just using our sugar, using our energy. And that can kind of worsen our ability to deal with sugar and kind of worsen our insulin resistance, because now we don't have anywhere to dump the sugar because our car has lost its engine and we got all this fuel. Yeah. So if we can do it slowly, keep the muscle and really just slowly lose the fat, then that's the more effective way to reverse your metabolic syndrome. And if you remember yesterday's talk, we talked about losing 5 to 15%. So, you know, anywhere from 3, depending on your weight, 3 to 6 kilos can really be something that just kick starts the reversal of metabolic syndrome. So, good question. Now, why do we as doctors worry about metabolic syndrome? You know, why am I up at night thinking about my patients and just, you know, please. Having metabolic syndrome doubles your risk of heart disease. So that's heart attacks, you know, and partly stroke. And it also increases your risk of having diabetes 5-fold, by 5 times as much, okay? And here's the sneaky part. Many people feel fine, completely fine. But inside they're not. It's just they don't see it, they don't feel it, but it's happening, okay? And again, nobody wants to be youngish and have a heart attack, a stroke. Other things that we get with this is we've got all this extra fat. We get fatty liver. Extra fat around our organs, we talked about, can give us sleep apnea, having extra weight on our whole body, pushing on our lungs, which can also raise our blood pressure. So this is why doctors care before the diabetes happens, because we can start to reverse this. So here's the hopeful part. Metabolic syndrome is reversible, okay? It's flag waving before we crash into the wall, and so we can start to do it. And the good thing, and we kind of mentioned this yesterday with the 5 to 15%, is you don't have to actually be skinny to reap the benefits. You just have to be metabolically healthier, okay? And that's that 5 to 10% loss, 15% loss is a huge benefit. You know, we talked about sleep and wrapped in, you know, sleep, fixing up our signals helps us get rid of that visceral fat. Moving, you know, exercising, doesn't have to be too much, you know, just getting out there so our muscles are using that sugar. Get those rusty doors, rusty locks moving, helps use the sugar. That helps reverse it. You know, our increased protein, remember, food pyramids doubled. Eating more protein, less sugar, because our body doesn't have the sugar to deal with. It can do the protein. Eating more fiber, because that helps stimulate our gut to help control fullness and hunger. And there was a question about medications. Yeah, modern medications can help some people. You just have to use it properly and medically. Okay, and that's not necessarily, the injectables you see on all the TikToks. Some of that's, things like metformin or other drugs that are there to help with, you're making your body more efficient at using the insulin and kind of overcoming the resistance. And I've seen many patients who have had borderline type 2 diabetes, or even, hey, you've got it, who have lost the weight, even that little bit and enough and kept off, have brought their blood pressure down, have brought their blood sugars down into better control and not needed the medications and been able to control with diet. So the answer is things are reversible. You can solve this problem. It's never quite too late to get started early. When it's really late in the game, it's probably missed the mark. But with metabolic syndrome, these flags are going up, and we can catch them sooner. There was a question: is metabolic syndrome reversible without medication? I think Mom's home. Is metabolic syndrome reversible without medication? Yeah, again, for many, yes, it is going to help reverse, because we're going to lose weight. We're going to get these things controlled. But medication, again, we treat it as a tool, because the big thing isn't really avoiding medication. This early in the game, it's about avoiding diabetes, avoiding the heart disease, and avoiding the complications of that, strokes and all of that. So again, metabolic syndrome, it's not a failure. It's an early warning radar. And if anything in this talk has sort of rang true to you, if you go, oh, my stomach, my waist is a little bigger, my blood pressure has been creeping up, the GP's been mentioning these things, if you recognize yourself in this talk, it's not bad news. It's not dire news. It's good timing, because now you know that if we fix this, if you fix this, if we fix your metabolism, weight loss is going to be the side effect. But a healthier metabolic you is going to be the result. And that's going to help you. Okay? You're not going to be, punishing yourself for not being skinny. You're going to punish yourself if you don't recognize those flags this early, and, take care of it when it was easier. Okay? Can exercise alone fix metabolic syndrome? Look, exercise helps, and particularly like resistance training, because you do want to build muscles. You do want to build the things that help use the sugar, use that. But again, sleep, controlling your stress, all those things are going to help too. So those are important, because if you just try one, you've got 3 other things that are going to be working against you. Find a harmony, and use supports. Use your doctor, use your friends. Use us. Come to the live stream, ask some questions. Thank you to everyone who's been asking live questions. Yeah, so it's not just muscles, okay? So I guess a couple of questions for everyone who's still watching. Hopefully you're still watching. Has anyone here watching been told they're borderline for their blood sugar or their BP or their cholesterol? Metabolic syndrome. Before tonight, had you actually heard the term metabolic syndrome? Probably yes, because you've been watching us, and I've been pitching this all week. It's again, it's waist size is probably a better predictor than BMI. Okay. Oh, here's a good question. Is this my fault? I feel like I failed at dieting. So the question is, metabolic syndrome. Is this my fault? I feel like I failed at dieting. No, this is biology. Okay, it's not a character flaw. You didn't fail you. It's the insulin resistance. It makes your body hold on to that fat more aggressively. It's survival mode. So the only thing that you would fail at is if you don't recognize these signs while you can still do something about it in a more easy way. Okay. And that's where you have support here, there, everywhere. Okay. Again, your body is geared to survive. It's geared to hold on to fat and energy. We just got to kind of make it work on holding the energy a different way. Okay. Oh, that was a good question. Good question. What? One more question. Sorry. Somebody who's obviously watched the stream the other day. Does holding in my pee affect my metabolism? No. No, your bladder isn't causing metabolic syndrome. But we did talk about this week how hydration does affect your hunger hormones, your insulin sensitivity. So to a degree, hydration can worsen your appetite regulation. And having concentrated urine could be kind of a sign of dehydration. So maybe, no, holding your pee doesn't affect your metabolism or cause metabolic syndrome. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Again, I think a good takeaway from today about metabolic syndrome is that metabolic syndrome is reversible. Okay. Take that away. And you know what? For this week, just to sum it up, if anybody's still watching, type belly if you learned something new about visceral fat this week. All right. Good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back Monday around 5:10 for some more Teletrim streams. I'll try to put some topics up on the webpage. Definitely be sure to post some messages to the YouTube channel or whatever. And if there's any topics that you're interested in, I'm always happy to research and talk about it. Again, thanks for tuning in, and don't hold your pee, okay?